this administration and this Pentagon are becoming very, very different from what I just said. Mm. They're becoming a Pentagon and an administration that likes war, likes killing people on the high seas in total violation of international law, for example. So this administration is off the charts in terms of routine, if you will, and the way people normally feel about the use of force. Trump's a liar. He's an outright liar. He has told his entire MAGA group that he's against war, that he doesn't like war, and yet he relishes killing people. And he relishes especially killing people through proxies. All we have to do is look at Ukraine and look at Gaza to see that in, vivid detail. So this is a very different administration. I've served 6 presidents. I've known every president since 1950, really, and I have never seen anything like this. So that's my general comment. Nothing has compared to this. Not Nixon, not Johnson, not JFK, certainly not Eisenhower. No president has ever been as incompetent and as intent on killing people domestically and overseas than this president and this administration.
Why do you think that is? Because the first Trump administration, one of the things that he didn't do was he didn't start a new war. And there was this moment in 2019 that the issues with the tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, when things really boiled up in the summer of 2019, and there was a US drone shot down, and apparently there were already talks of hitting the Iranians directly, and the administration didn't do that. But he killed Soleimani, of course, then in that winter, the next winter. But no large war. And now the second administration seems to be going a completely different route, as you said, Venezuela and shooting at ships and saying like they were smuggling, therefore we can kill them, which is absolutely not true. That's just not how international law works. And of course, all the decapitation strikes, which Mr. Trump is very proud of saying, yeah, we were part of that. We helped the Israelis to kill a lot of people while pretending to be negotiating. Why this change?
In his first term, Trump was not non-warrior at all. Trump set up the conditions, and Biden continued those conditions for the war in Ukraine. So this is not a president who doesn't like war. This is a president who comes at it from different directions than most presidents when he does do it. And what that different direction is most assertively is proxies. He's using proxies. He's using Ukraine. He's using Georgia, or trying to. He's using Armenia and Azerbaijan, or trying to. He tried to use Romania. He's using other countries in NATO to do things that shouldn't be being done right now, not if you don't want a global war. And does he know about it? I'll be the first to admit that it may be Mossad, MI6, CIA doing a lot of this. It may be Hegseth doing it. It may be others in the administration doing it. Indeed, it may even be other people in NATO doing it. And maybe Trump is so incompetent, he doesn't even know what's going on because he doesn't take National Security Council briefings. He doesn't have a national security advisor who looks over by job description, looks over the entire interagency, particularly defense and state, and coordinates policy for it. He doesn't have one. Rubio is too busy attacking people in Latin America or trying to attack people in Latin America. He's not even a good Secretary of State, and he's not a national security advisor. So who is coordinating policy in the Trump administration? On Monday, it's the chief of staff. On Tuesday, it's Stephen Miller. On Wednesday, it's Hegseth. On Thursday, it's Rubio. You take your pick. Secretary of the Treasury weighs in every now and then. Director of the FBI weighs in every now and then. There is no coordinated policy coming out of the Trump administration. There's just support for wars that he helped start in his first administration. Biden augmented majorly, And the most prominent of them are, of course, the wars in the Levant, and we're getting ready to extend that to Iran very shortly. I'll predict it'll happen before Thanksgiving. And maybe even further if Netanyahu gets a real burr in his saddle. So anybody wants to tell me that Trump doesn't like war or doesn't enter wars or doesn't start wars or doesn't relish wars has got to tell me what they're talking about, because it just isn't in the proof of the pudding.
No.
And there's, as I said, there is no coordination of policy in this administration. Zero. It just flows out of Trump's mouth when he tweets or does whatever he does. But the basic things that are happening underneath him, and they're happening with the various people who are doing what they can while he is oblivious to what they're doing. Or he's orchestrating the whole thing all on his own, and it's really kind of hideous what he's doing, both domestically and internationally. But I don't believe that for a minute. This man is incapable of orchestrating action on his own. So what's happening is we have chaos. We have chaos from one end of the administration to the other.
I mean, the White House must be a chaotic place even under a well-organized president and administration, just because it is so many. No?
Not true. I served George H.W. Bush, and Brent Scowcroft is his national security advisor. Colin Powell is his chairman. Dick Cheney is his secretary of defense. Jim Baker is secretary of state. It was as smooth a decision-making process. I've taught this for 16 years on 3 campuses. It was the smoothest decision-making process I've ever seen. And then along came Bill Clinton, and I served that president the first year of his administration. It was total chaos. Now, Clinton did get his act together by the second term, but it makes a hell of a difference who's in the so-called group of 6, group of 7, group of 8. The people who actually do what the 1947-48 National Security Act says they are supposed to do. That is to say, they run the National Security Council in lieu of cabinet government anytime they're doing something that is strategic, that is security-based or foreign policy-based. The lead accordingly will be the State Department or the Pentagon, depending on which is the heaviest weight in the mixture, so to speak. And the National Security Advisor coordinates the whole thing. Now, I saw the best administration we've had since World War II outside of Eisenhower. And Eisenhower started and molded this process because the act was so fresh at that time. But he's the one who started the process and made it into what it is today. H.W. Bush was Eisenhower reincarnated. You could not argue with the experience the man had. I mean, look at it. He was 8 years Ronald Reagan's vice president. He was ambassador to China. He was director of the CIA. He was head of the RNC. There was hardly anything H.W. Bush. Plus, he was in World War II as a 17, 18-year-old fighter pilot in the Pacific. I mean, this is a man who knew what he was doing when he came to the presidency. 8 years as vice president. And I know he ran those 2 administrations, not Ronald Reagan. Everybody thinks Ronald Reagan was the greatest thing since sliced bread. H.W. Bush was the man doing all the dirty work in that administration, both those administrations. So I know what a good president looks like. I know what a mediocre one looks like. Bill Clinton, Obama, a little bit better than Clinton, but not a whole lot better. And I know what a really unbelievably incompetent president looks like. And that's Donald Trump.
So would you say like part of the problem that we're seeing now is this disorganization, the chaos that stems from incompetence because the administration is not able to structure itself and hence have a proper information flow up and down? Because that's then slightly different than from him, being lusting for blood and wanting to do war. But it seems to me to be like both, probably. I mean, he seems to enjoy this kind of power, but at the same time, the decision making is now, I mean, anyone's guess of how policy is being made.
It is. I don't think policy is being made. I do not think policy is being made. And if policy is not made, strategy can't be designed, because you have to have a policy in order to build a strategy to implement that policy.
Yes.
And then you have to have operations underneath that strategy. None of that is happening. None of it's happening. What happens is Trump gets up in the morning or sometime in the night or whatever, and he says, I think we ought to send some troops into Memphis. I think we ought to send some troops to the southern border. I think we ought to do this. I think we ought to do that. And then the bureaucracy reacts to that. And maybe he remembers what he said for them to do 2 days later when they come back to try to tell him what the results of what he said are. This is bizarre. This administration is totally bizarre. He gets up and says before the inauguration, and then after the inauguration, he repeats it, that he's going to stop the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Or at least he's going to stop the war in Ukraine. He's done nothing. Absolutely nothing. He's made it worse. He's done nothing. So how do you judge a man like that who tells you he's going to stop a war and then does nothing?